got Jules Lund and Anthony from Tribe giving up their time tonight.
How disappointing. I mean, we have to follow Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to be disappointing after that, surely.
It's close, it's close. Tonight, other one, Slido, please ask some questions here. You guys get to pick which ones go to the top. Thumbs up or thumbs down, which one's the best. And welcome.
Great. Awesome to be here.
Thank you, thank you. Let's go back. I'm going to pick on you mainly, Jules. Right.
That's right. That's why I brought Ant here, because he's going to beat you up if you do.
Oh, good, good. You guys are much bigger than I thought.
Yeah. Just to give you a bit of context, and I know that Chris just gave you a little bit of that, but Anthony is the CEO of Tribe. Obviously, I'm the founder, and we're really honoured to be, amongst this group tonight. We really feel like we've had a great sort of 15 months since launch. And we feel so fresh in the process that it'll be great to be able to sort of pick it apart. And we certainly don't have all the answers, but we've got plenty of questions that we can sort of unpack with you. But to give me an idea, and I just wanted to get a grasp on who's in the room, where you sort of come from, at what level in the entrepreneurial sphere you're at. So,
all right. So how many startups?
Startups.
All right. How many funded startups? All right. How many corporates got a job there, just hate their job?
So is that why the corporates you want to get out of that life and you're looking for something to own yourself? Is that right?
That's unofficially. They're not allowed to say that.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, that's a sort of really good mix. So it's sort of mostly early stage.
Well, how many Jules Lund stalkers? There's a couple here, I know. All right, good.
It's easier.
So, look, I always go back with. I start with: was there a mother or father that was an entrepreneur?
Were my parents an entrepreneur? No, not in the least bit. I think I was quite entrepreneurial as a kid, though, trying to hustle to make bank. Like, for instance, most of it was illegal. We used to take mum and dad's vacuum cleaner bag out and cover cars in the neighbouring suburbs, and then Saturday morning had a car wash sign, $3. And
nice.
So we created the demand.
Love it.
We trained the local golden retriever to collect golf balls off the greens, because there was a golf course down the end of our street, and there was a fairway that sort of curved, and we used to sit down the creek with the dog, and as soon as the ball would get on the green, we'd teach it to go and grab the ball, and then we'd go around to the other hole and sell it back to the same golfer. So there was always ways of making money and trying to hustle, but I don't think I've ever really had much guidance.
Well, no, there always seems to be that. I mean, from all the people I've interviewed so far, something when they were a kid.
Yeah.
They were selling that, they did the lemonade stand, that kind of thing. How about yourself?
Nothing illegitimate like that, that's for sure. My father was in business, but I wouldn't say it was an overt drive for entrepreneurialism. I guess as a kid I was probably a bit of a hustler and a salesperson as well, but nothing from my parental background which really drove me towards it.
All right, thanks. That was fucking useless, mate. I can give you.
What about you? I mean, is that a big part of it? Because I was, I've always sort of felt. I can imagine that if your parents are entrepreneurial, you'd think it's because of that. But I think I don't think there'd be much of a relationship between that, because I think often when you're scrapping and trying, it's a sense of entitlement that you're just allowing to be unleashed. I deserve that, I want that, and I'm going to find a way to get that, and I have to be resourceful. I mean, that's the closest sort of definition of entrepreneur that I can think of.
I did have a story like that.
Yep.
It's fresh in my memory. You guys are going to love it, don't worry. Because I'm an investor in a law tech startup called Law Advisor, and they had an investor that said, tell Chris to take his bio down. Because of this reason. Because my first entrepreneurial story was I used to sell Penthouse magazine by the pages to the kids at school.
Yeah, smart.
Why didn't you think of that
Yeah.
one?
Yeah. Well, I had some other ways.
You didn't want to sell them. That was the problem.
I used to take a flat milk carton into the news agency, and I would go and get the Penthouse, and I'd roll it up and I'd put it in the milk carton, and I'd pay $2 for it.
Nice.
And it looked like I was just buying milk.
All right.
Because it was the only way. I couldn't get it out in any other way except right in front of them, but they just didn't realise what was in there.
Nice, very nice. Okay.
Can I throw an interjection in there?
Yeah,
I realised that as soon as the Penthouse went out of, they cut the logo.
Oh, yeah,
Threw
yeah.
them all in the bin so you could get them for free.
Yeah. But you have to
There you go.
go through the bin. Anyway,
Yeah, you're hanging around the newsagent a bit too much. All right.
Next question.
All right, yeah.
now you just Google sunshine and there's baby books. Anything. You Google anything and it's in your face.
So let's fast forward to your education. What were you studying at school?
Look, I was creative and analytical, so there was a nice balance in the sense that I was good at creative writing, and but I did a lot of art. In school, I actually did photography and graphic design and art, and that's what I really enjoyed mostly. And to be honest, most of the business is built on my need to visualise things. Like, you know, even today we were having a discussion about payment systems in our business on the whiteboard, and I'm just looking at all this stuff. I feel like I just need to see the screens. And the way I developed the app was it was design first, you know, like it was like, how do I want to use it and what does it look like, and then sort of work with it the other way around. But I studied graphic design after school, and then I started working with teenagers through a foundation called the Reach Foundation with Jim Steins, and then from there I got into TV, and I suppose where I'm ending up is where I'm most happiest, which is strangely in marketing. All through that process, no matter what I did, it was all around marketing. I've always been obsessed looking at billboards. My poor wife, if we pull up at an intersection and I'm just there going, why did they think they could put a font size that big at the billboard? I'm always getting frustrated, you know, by marketing. And so I'm in the right spot because I feel like, you know, we can create a whole new form of marketing, which is what Tribe really does.
Well, before we get into the Tribe story, and I'll bounce back and forth between you two, can you talk about how you got into TV and, you know, your success going through, which I imagine a lot of entrepreneurial traits in there too, right? Hustling to get.
Yeah. To be honest, it all comes down to telling a story. You know, everything that I've done revolves around trying to command someone's attention, and being an attention seeker, really. But I suppose that my success through television and radio came from me being able to package up my value in a way that was irresistible to who I was offering it to. That's where all my focus went. So I know that sounds like a bit weird, but I'll give you a bit of perspective. I wrote down in my diary once I wanted to be, and I was, I would have been about 22. And I wrote in my diary, I want to be the adventurous host on Getaway, you know, the 20 to 25's adventurous host. And, you know, as you remember, that was a dream job of everyone, so it didn't really mean much that I'd put it in that. But then what I did was I broke it down into a yearly task, a monthly task, a weekly task, and then a daily task, and then hourly tasks. And I basically dedicated 12 months of my life to creating a 3-minute show reel that was able to demonstrate that I was the best man for the job. So I transformed my body, like I was eating, you know, toasted sandwiches on the couch in my undies watching Jerry Springer up to that point. And I just had a fat gut, so I knew I had to look healthy. I had to pretend I was outdoorsy because I wasn't that outdoorsy. And then I had to train my memory, like I had to learn scripts. And so I had to learn from, from other people like Oprah Winfrey and read autobiographies. I did every course in Australia for TV presenting. I ran out of those. And then I did acting courses and I ran out of those. And then I did voiceover courses and I just kept training myself. And when I ran out of all of those, I got my cousin, and my cousin and I would go down with a handy cam and I would address an issue that I had I was training myself, but address an issue that I had. So, one of the things was I had a fear that I would be out on the street being a getaway host, and I would be distracted by things, and they would take my attention, and then I'd stuff up and have to do another take. So I had to train that out of myself, and so the ways that I did that were extreme. I got my cousin down, I stood in the doorway at the back of a supermarket at peak hour because I knew the doors were trying to close on me and people were trying to get past with trolleys, and I was just trying to look and I knew that I was in the way, to look my cousins, down the barrel of the camera and just learn it even though people were hustling. I did that so much on so many different occasions until I could just do it without being distracted. So when I was able to, go out on the street, then I go, well, it's never as bad as that. So that fear just disappears because I go, well, it's not as bad as that. So it's just conquered. And the other one was I was scared of, friends would be seeing me and I'd feel like a dickhead talking to this camera. And so I thought, what's the worst thing? How am I going to confront that? So I stood on a bin down at the front of Jam Factory and did my pieces, all these pieces to camera that I just scribbled off getaway, other people doing them, and transcribed them, and then but I did it over the road, just one after another, standing on a bin, feeling like an idiot until I just had conquered that, and then I moved on. So I put this showreel together and hired a crew. I spent $10,000 on it, worked at a surf shop to hire the money, to save the money. And then I got 250 of these things made. I got a professional graphic designer, professional photographer. I was 22 and it was a ridiculous amount of money to be investing in something, but just wanted to back myself. And I put this thing together, and literally almost like the day that I had finished it, I got a call from someone saying, hey, we're doing this thing. Would you like to audition for it? And he said, I'm meeting with the people at 9. And I sent them a package, and I gave them 5 of these show reels and said for the guys at 9. And literally they watched that and said, we've got to get him into Getaway. And within a few weeks, I was auditioning and I felt like an idiot. I was up against a few other people because I went through this process anyway. And I just, because I'd been so match fit, I just blitzed it, got the job, and went back to my diary and just went, it was the obsession around it. But what my learning was and how I've carried it through into what we're doing
Well,
here.
hold on, we need a round of applause for that bit.
Just like Jerry Springer, huh? The learning, I suppose, that I've taken from that is the amount of effort. When you're going to tap someone on the shoulder and grab their attention, just have something good to say. And it took me 12 months to say something in 3 minutes. But it was what was essential. When we raised 760 grand off the back of a PDF, on a document. It was a concept, nothing built. It was just me and some people. But I put so much effort. I made a video to make this thing look like it existed and was already good. Had screen grabs that were just literally just click through. They're just images in my iPhotos scroll, and made it look like there was this full app, and just built this world until it looked already existed and people were missing out when nothing was created. And then that when it's good enough, those videos, and because you go to so much more effort, you just cut through the pack and it's really just you. They're looking at that and they've got that opportunity. Whereas there's billions of people at this level, but there's few at that. And so that if you build something that it will travel like a message in a bottle, and it did. It travelled to Gabby and Hezi Leibovich from Catch of the Day. Had never even met the guys, and they wanted to put some money in, and they did, and it got us off the ground, and we're here today because of it. Because it went from one person and they shared it to another one, because it just stood out from every other pitch that they'd been sent.
Well, I've interviewed the guys, great guys, very humble about their stuff. But so is that really just over-delivering? Is that how you kind of like...
Well, Anne would agree with that. I mean, we slow. That's the balance of progress. So that's my OCD and my obsession. It's got to be counterbalanced by someone like Ant. And the reason why Ant's up here today is because the last time when I spoke to a group like this, all I did was talk about Ant and what he's been able to bring to the company. It was pointless me just saying that when I could just bring him and he'll be able to express the way that we work together to complement and challenge each other is really important. Because if it was just me, then we wouldn't be here. And if it was just Ant, we wouldn't be here either.
Well, so, I work with my brother, and I'm the creative guy, and he's the one that kind of keeps me down to earth. I imagine it sounds like that's a bit of what's happening here, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not creative at all.
Well, not that. I mean, he comes up with this crazy stuff, and you're like, trying to be a bit more...
Yeah, it's interesting how we got together, and that story from Jules, I've heard it before, and it just amazes me every time, because when you think about the sort of next level founders in very big businesses, they're the type of qualities that you sort of hear about in backstories, and it's what's required to get you onto TV, into a gig like that, and it certainly transitions so amazingly well into our business. And Jules doesn't have a business background. My background is far more business, operational, marketing and management. And as Jules said, that alone isn't enough. And Jules on his own isn't enough. And the two of us working together complement each other really, really well, because he has that creativity and that vision in a new industry. And then I sort of apply my lens onto it, which is a lot of the practicality of execution, or even some sort of risk mitigation lens. Yeah, is this going to put our company at risk, or potentially put us at risk of bad PR or something like that? So the two assets together work really well, and it's amazing because I haven't been involved in a business such as this before, and every day I think we recognise how important not only our roles, but everyone that works in our company now, what they bring to the business and how important it is.
So tell me the story about how it got started and Jules tapping you on the shoulder, or like, did you have a relationship before,
No, it was, I guess, very much by chance. My background is marketing. At university, I sort of worked in marketing for a few years, and I went off to Europe for about 7 years. I started a few businesses there. I guess I always had this entrepreneurial drive, although the point about creativity, like my businesses weren't all that creative, they were just effectively executed. So I took other people's ideas that I was looking at around the world, and I sort of just did it in a market that I was in. And again, they weren't overly successful businesses, but relatively. And then sort of found myself in e-commerce, and just ended up being in a position where I was looking for a new role at the time when these guys were putting their deck together and raising capital. And we met through a recruitment agency that I've been networking with for a long time, and I mean, Jules' obsession into the areas that he's very strong in. I also obsessed about what that presentation I gave to him and the board was, and I practiced. It probably would have been 40 or 50 times in the prior week, because for me, I thought this is a role that was made for me, and then also ultimately I knew that it would also come down to how well Jules and I got along, and that sort of leveled me off a little bit, because I knew that if we didn't get along as people, there wasn't much I could do about that, and then it wouldn't make a great working team. So that was a fortunate part of it, that we did get along, with a few sort of bumps, especially in the early days while we worked each other out. But yeah, it was just right place, right time. And I was explaining before that, they were looking for a CEO. You can't go out into market or to a recruiter and say, we want a startup CEO with 10 years experience, because the startup industry isn't that old. And so you've sort of got to blend together a lot of different skills. I had a little bit of business on my own. I had fast growth experience, and just happened to present it in the right way.
So backtracking a bit, Jules, here, in the bio there's the key mention to your role on radio, and then the impact that had on your Facebook page, and that being like the biggest thing in Australia at the time. And then you seem to be very tuned into it, and then you sort of the opportunity to grow from that.
Yeah. Look, long story short, came from TV, everything that I saw was visual, got into radio, and none of my ideas could work on radio, essentially. So they said, go and play with the social media platforms that no one really cares about here in radio. So I spent some time on the Facebook page. I was the last to every social media platform. I don't even use Facebook socially. But I used it to express all the fun that we were having on radio. So I was hosting a show with Fifi Box and it was the afternoons, and for 3 years it was just awesome. And I was able to express in a real graphic design sort of way the stuff that was really just transferred over the radio waves. That resonated and went really well. And then what I realised was this actually, the social media platform was just there to really support the radio show. But what I realised very quickly was it was a completely different audience. I mean, we had fans on our Facebook page that never listened to the radio, So then I got really excited about it, and it became the most engaged brand page in the country. And from there, I suppose a lot of the media agencies and advertising agencies were asking, how did you get this asset to the radio station? I said Jules was working on it. So then I went out and started to pitch and give them ideas and share insights into how to engage tribes. And from there, they started offering me a lot of sponsored posts before influencer marketing really was a thing. And but what I realised was it was infuriating because there was 12 people in the way to do something that was very simple, and they just needed a workflow solution. And so that's what I designed, something for me that would get out all the noise, the clutter, the Chinese whispers, and just get something that was just far more streamlined. So I just did that because I loved it through my graphic design, which is not much different than UI UX. And then through that I thought, it's worth having a crack and putting some money behind it to see if we can build it. So essentially, for those that don't know, the app, Tribe, and feel free to download it and have a bit of a scroll through it. There's about 300 brands in there, all different brands, whether it's shirt you're wearing, shoes, watch, glasses, hat, etc. There's all these brands in there that people use, that we spend our money on as consumers. And you'd be surprised at how many photos on your photo roll in your phone right now feature your favourite brands. Wine you're drinking, sunnies on your head, restaurant that you're at. And so it's really about giving brands the opportunity for everyday content creators to create content celebrating their favourite brands and then sharing it to their friends, and giving brands the opportunity to ask them to do that and then just pay them a few $100 if they do. And so we've given out $1.5 million paid out over the last sort of 15 months since launch, and these are to everyday people that might have 3,000 followers or 10,000 followers. They're not celebrities by any stretch of the imagination. They're 8,500 content creators that have just been, tinkering away on their social media and expressing the fact that they love food or photography or street art or gardening or pets or baking cupcakes. It's just all this creativity, and brands are absolutely loving it. So it's been a really exciting journey.
How does the startup take advantage of your platform? And is it, like, you're not going to get to, the influencer with 50,000 might be hard to get, maybe, get to these 3,000 people. What's the strategy that a startup can use to effectively use influencers?
Okay, so these guys, the startup here.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we designed a platform for basically all types of brands. It's very industry agnostic, so we work with big media agencies as well as startup businesses, be they sort of fashion labels or tech. And the key to the platform is that it's self-serve. So it's like building a Facebook ad. You would just go to our website, build a campaign, launch the campaign. What we do differently in our industry is that we don't let you see the influencers. So you go into the platform blind, and we say that influencers are the ones who should choose you, because the best advocates for your brands are the ones who actually want to talk about you, not the ones that you want to pay money to. So once you launch a brief live, it hits the influencer app, and then you start to see content. And on the influencer side, what we also do differently is that influencers aren't just pitching themselves, they're actually creating content about you and your brand before you've even paid them a cent. So
So kind of like a reverse market?
Well, absolutely. We are a classic marketplace model, which is very popular in this country and certainly in the startup world. But more and more we see our competitors enter the space here in Asia, in the US, and no one's quite done it like we have, which is on the brand side, telling brands you won't see who you're going to be dealing with until they actually submit content to you, and on the influencer side saying there's no guarantee of payment, but you have to create the content up front. And it's really important when you're building a marketplace, this concept of equilibrium. And equilibrium extends to what your balance looks like on each side of the marketplace, so how many buyers and how many sellers, and what's the ratio between the two. But also the distribution of power, so that if you give one side something, you have to balance that with giving the other side something. And I guess we designed it with that purpose, is to say, okay, well, brands, you have the disadvantage of not knowing who you're going to work with, but you have the advantage of seeing all the content before you have to buy it. Influencers, you have the disadvantage of having to produce the content before getting purchased, but you have the advantage of choosing who you want to work with. And it works remarkably effectively.
From a startup perspective and the marketplace, right? Chicken or the egg kind of thing. How did you get through that? We had, Matt who founded 99 Designs, then hired, and his recommendation was take the hardest side first and try and make sure there's enough buyers, or if it's the suppliers. How did you go through that kind of journey, and how did you get it to balance out?
Yeah, I guess we sort of winged it a little bit. We had this advantage of being an app, an iOS app, and it's got a lot better, but a year and a half ago when you were developing an iOS app, it took you about, ages to develop, and then even when you submitted it, you would go through rejection, and then approval. And so while we were going through that rejection process, we needed to start developing relationships with brands, and we actually just went to progressive brands who we felt were friendly towards our concept. We were very upfront with them and said, look, this is what we're trying, it's not going to cost you a cent, come into the platform, build something, and it might take a month before you even start getting content back. And so essentially what we did is we built a holding inventory in the app before the app got launched, so that when Apple finally said, yep, your app's right, you can go to market, you would download the app, there was already 10 brands in there. And that then started to see the influencer side, which was the app, filter into the marketplace. And since then, it's effectively grown with equilibrium. Now, our equilibrium is not 1-for-1, it's about 5-to-1, and it varies for 10-to-1, and we start to look at equilibrium per vertical. So if we've got 100 fashion brands, how many fashion influencers do we need to balance that out? But it was simply that concept of get brands, convince them to wait, and then when you sort of open the gate, then the other side will come in.
Yeah, just to add to that, if you are building a marketplace, there was a bit of BS there. I think we sort of said to a lot of the brands, look, we want you sitting in the app waiting for the people until we open the floodgates. And the reality was there were no floodgates. No one was on the other side of the gate. But it is a bit like saying you've got to come to the world's biggest party. Now, the party doesn't exist, so it's not the world's biggest party. But if everyone here it's the world's biggest party, they all turn up and it becomes the world's biggest party. And so it was a little bit of that, and we just had to back ourselves. But it's it's that nerve-wracking moment of feeling like you can get caught out. But you got to fake it till you make it.
And what about how much influence did you have over the process, Jules? I imagine you had all these relationships from television and radio. Was it just knocking on the door of your buddies first to get started? Look,
ironically, it was the complete opposite. That was the most confusing part for all of us. When I first designed it, there was no such thing as an influencer, let alone a micro-influencer. They were just celebrities. They were my friends who were athletes and actors and pop stars and people that I interviewed on radio. So I sort of imagined that I was building a marketplace for them because they had big social media followings and brands wanted to align themselves with them. So I sort of designed it with all their faces in the pitch deck to start off with, and sadly a lot of the investors were really excited because they were going to be hanging out with Jennifer Hawkins and Delta Goodrem, but then we realised really quickly when we were launching and we were talking about, right, now we have to find a floodgate, now we have to create some demand on the other side because they're waiting patiently. We told them we're not letting anyone in. Everyone was allowed in, it's just no one was there. But then when Ant started, it was scary because Ant's gone, are on a list of all the celebrities you and then we wrote them all down, and then we said, right, now we're going to get them all in. And I was like, I don't want to ask them. I was really embarrassed, and it was hard, and they were non-cooperative. And then I realised, oh, that's right, celebrities are a pain in the ass. Like, they're just divas, and they're not going to submit content up front because the reality is they already had a brand pipeline. Not that it was clean, but you know, even though I didn't have an app, I still had people coming through. You know, the client goes to the agency goes to my radio station, tactics team goes to sales to my agent to me. That was what I was trying to cut out of there, but I still had a brand pipeline. So, you know, I could still make $2,000 from a post going down to Luna Park. But the reality is they weren't going to submit it. They weren't going to waste the time to go, oh, I've gone down and bought this. See, the other thing about our platform around the authenticity is that we don't send out any sampling. So it's really unique in a sense that if you don't own the product or you're not willing to buy it, you have no right to recommend that your tribe does. And so early days, celebrities said, get stuffed. You know, there's no way I'm going to go down and buy a pair of volleys, for instance, and take a photo and then you guys just say no, when I've got someone over here who's offering me, you know, $1,000 to do it. You know, so there was a dangerous sort of area there where it was misconceived. And Ant was like, you've got to speak to these. But it was right around that time I was starting to sense something else that was shifting. And we were sort of at different stages of it, because I had to say to Ant, I don't think that's it. And even though all our investors said, come on, you've got to get all the celebrities in there to talk about this, there was this undercurrent of just literally smaller groups. And because we were tech, we could do what no one else could do. So we got 8,500 in there. Like, if you put a brief out to those people, you'd have to email them, phone calls, and it would just be, you would never have a meeting over a $200 post. No one's going to spend that time. Whereas in an app, the technology, it's just built for scale. And so it worked in our favour that all of a sudden there was this undercurrent, this social entrepreneur, like the girl who is a dietitian, lives in Sydney, she's made $70,000 from our platform last year. These are people that have 140,000 followers, you know, and all of a sudden they can quit their job, you know, and it becomes a freelance economy like an Uber or an Airbnb, and it's for creatives that are doing what they love doing, which is taking photos of sunsets or, you know, doing nail art. Believe it or not. Yeah.
But okay, so talk about floodgates weren't there. What happened next? How did you get the people coming through?
It actually, once we launched in the App Store, it happened pretty quickly. And I think, you know, having a prominent and high-profile founder, you got to leverage off everything that you possibly can, and not just in who he was and the recognition, but actually in his knowledge of the PR world. And so we managed to get some pretty good PR. In the early days, which for any startup out there, I can't recommend PR highly enough. Like
to spend money on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can get it for free, get it for free. But as a cost of marketing, I think it's well worth it in the early days. And it was probably in that first month after launch that we just sort of started seeing a steady stream of people come in. And to Jules's point on, you know, we went out thinking it might be a celebrity platform. The earliest wow moment we had was when we realised it wasn't. And we started just doing very rudimentary analysis on the amount of followers that people had in the platform. And we realised it was these everyday people. We later trademarked the term citizen influencer, I think, which never caught on, unfortunately. We now refer to them...
Not yet.
Exactly. We now refer to them as micro-influencers, which is the more recognised term. But then when you sort of not only understand that they're the users of your platform, but how beneficial they are to the whole ecosystem of the marketplace. So they're far easier to deal with, they're far more tech savvy, they've got far higher engagement in their content, their followers follow them for their content, not for who they are. And ultimately, they never had the brand pipeline that we were now delivering them, as Jules said, the celebrities did, even though it was in a broken way. And so we built this product which wasn't necessarily intended for them, but very quickly realised it was for them, and more started to come in. And one of the greatest, I guess, influences we have in these people's lives, which is, it's really amazing when you hear about these stories of people who who are making all this money through our platform is people love to talk about money. They love to talk about the extra money they're earning on the side or what they did while they're waiting for a bus and made $200. And so naturally the word of mouth spread as we started paying out more and more money and rewarding these people who are creating amazing content for brands who had never had the opportunity to buy such content at such reasonable prices with the same efficiency. We grew largely on word of mouth in those early days.
Has that come around full circle and now some of these early targets are now like, better get on this thing?
Yeah. Yeah, lots. Like Michael Clark reached out the other day and he popped into Tribe.
And what did you say, you prick? You didn't do it at the beginning?
I gave him a few pointers.
No, it just doesn't, to be honest, it doesn't work for those guys. They have a brand pipeline and I don't think, like I have a lot of friends that reach out and say, look, you know, I'm hearing a lot about Tribe, can I get on there? Like friends from, you know, for instance, at the races have got hit up a lot. So, and I actually say it's not ready for you guys yet. You know, it's not right for you yet. Because they'll submit content and it'll get declined and they'll go, I'm not doing that again. So we're going to find out another product for those individuals if they're of value. I mean, the bottom line is that they're not that good at content creators. You know, actors and sport, like they got their followers because, you know, they were on The Bachelorette or, you know, on radio. It's just not the same. It's not, like if you didn't see that, like it should be content first, not popularity, and that's what we've seen this massive shift, and that's actually the future of this industry. It's actually not influencer marketing; it's just the content creation. Soon, you know, our brands will go into our platform and say, I don't care if that person's got no followers. Like that girl is a photographer, and you've obviously got awesome photos. You might not have any followers, but that content is like such high quality, you could print it on a billboard. Rather than me going off and spending $250,000 on a few handful of images, I want someone like that who takes amazing shots on the DSLR or even the 7, you know, the new 7 Plus, which has 2 lenses and has a shallow depth of field. I mean, just the technology is getting so much better to allow everyone to take better and better photos, and it's just cheap and it's how people express themselves. The chances of me going to, you know, someone, a celebrity, a pop star, and go, can you go out and take beautiful photos? They just don't have they don't stand a chance.
Let me take some questions while we've got them up here. I love fake it till you make it, but I always get hung up on being a good person. Is a lie if it comes true? A bit of morality.
You've got to back yourself, and it's really about a leap of faith, and it takes courage. You know, it's really frightening. Like, you know, Ant and I are pretty open about our vulnerability through this whole process. You know, it's scary as hell. It's really tough. You know, there's a lot of moments where you believe, but you don't know, and so you have to act like you do know, and that's what fake it till make it is. You know, it's just about going, I don't even know if I can deliver on this, but something inside me says I can, and that's just, you've got to lean into that darkness. And you know, you'll have, through this whole process, there's just nothing but doubt, constant doubt. And that's why you need good advisors around you, because sometimes the doubt can not serve you, because sometimes it does. But if it's not serving you, it's good to be bouncing off other people to get rid of it out of your way pretty quick. And I think that if I was to say what is the number one benefit of having someone else, you know, because, you know, a lot of my friends and a lot of people in the industry are CEO founders, which is great. But if you're a CEO founder, I just think you just need a really good confidant so you can just bounce off them quickly. Because when Ant was away and uncontactable for a couple of weeks, it just took me 4 times. It just took 4 times longer to make a decision, because I'd be, should I do this? I don't know about that. Whereas I say it to him and he goes, nah, don't do that. And I'd just go, all right, I don't do that, and I move on. Or he goes, do that, and I do it. You know, that's a great idea. So it's just like that affirmation straight away, get on with it. I don't care if it's yes or no, but when someone else isn't there, it's that. And you have a lot of those question marks. But I mean, the reality is someone is going to be the next big startup. Someone in this room right now is going to have an absolute corker, and I will be sucking up to you. you know, in the future. Someone's going to do that, and that person sitting here right now has no more of an idea. They've got just as much doubt in their head as you do, but the difference is they're just going to lean in and have a crack anyway. So the question is, why the hell shouldn't that be you? And I've always said that to myself. Like, I've sat there and go, there's got to be someone else who's got to be the next host on Getaway. And that person sitting there doesn't bloody know right now. They're not there going, I'm going to nail this. They're sitting there shitting themselves and not sure if I'm doing the right thing, and what if I don't do this? So if they're sitting there and feeling that, and I'm feeling the same, well, I've got just as good a chance. So it's me, and I decide to.
Fucking love it. I had Ali here. He came because of your the connection to the charity, and then you also touched on, you know, it must be a great feeling to know that, you know, there's someone quit their job making this money from there. How much is there a correlation, do you think, between giving back and accelerating your success?
I'm pretty selfish. I mean, I certainly haven't, you know, I've had a lot more good karma than I've probably deserved. So, no, I feel embarrassed about the good fortune I've had. I certainly don't feel like I've earned it in giving to people. I've always felt like I get more out of others. And to be honest, since I've had kids and doing the business, I've never had my head further up my arse. Like, my sense of community and all those things have genuinely come second, because my sense of community is now, my number one job is just to be a bloody good dad. Like, if I was to contribute to this world, and if you want to change the world, just, you know, like, I've worked with enough kids, you know, probably run workshops for about 150,000 different kids in Victoria, and pretty much where we fail as a society is just dads, they just stuff it up. And it just, what it does and the impact it has on kids, and the flow and effect to their kids. And if you can just be a good dad, you transform the world. And so that for me is my number one rule. So the sense of giving to community outside of that is yeah, I'm just not there yet. But, you know, you have great successes, and then you go, God, I'm sick of looking after myself. I've got enough money to do that. I've got a bit more freedom, and I'd love to be able to give something back. And I certainly will spend, hopefully, decades doing that.
He's going to downplay the... Yeah, go on. That is awesome. So you... Very good. See, that's you know he's a good guy, right? Kind of downplayed helping 150,000 kids. I mean, yeah. You're a good guy.
There was 10 kids, and I sold them drugs.
That's better. That makes more sense. All right. I've always been confused about what the difference between advertising and marketing is, and what's your opinion? I imagine this is kind of coming together too with the social media stuff.
Look, very, very quickly, I don't know if Ant wants to add to this. We won't spend too much time on it, but for me, it's funny because it comes up through what we're talking about at the moment. There's a guideline around influencer marketing that you should put #ad, and I actually don't think it's an ad. I think it's sponsored content. You know, it's like the Super Bowl has ads in it, and the Super Bowl is sponsored, or, you know, Telstra sponsors. It's proudly brought to you by, you know, like a TV show like The Voice is proudly brought to you by Telstra. It doesn't mean The Voice, the show itself, is an ad. And so the content is funded by a brand, but it's created and it's conceptualized and it's entertaining and it's engaging. An advertisement to me can be those things, but it's very rare. I mean, we don't invite advertising into our world. We don't intentionally do it. The only time we do is the Super Bowl ads, where we actually invite it and we want it. But everything outside of that is interruptive. Whereas marketing, I feel, is something different. Because it's, to me, word of mouth marketing, in other words, the power of trusted referrals from a friend or family, is the most powerful. And that's really what is at the heart of our ecosystem. Because these brands aren't paying for advocacy. The advocacy they get for free. You know, what they're paying for is for that person to spend time crafting their love and taking a photo and submitting it, and also providing access to a tribe that they have spent years and years nurturing and cultivating and doing nothing but giving and giving and giving content and just loving, inviting into their world, getting trolled, being told she's fat or their work's crap, you know, putting themselves on the line, but just expressing that which they love, that passion or expertise. So that for me is marketing. You know, where we live is marketing, and it's very different. And I actually don't. I think if you get marketing right, and because social media has allowed us to do word of mouth marketing at scale, it's the first real opportunity in history to be able to do that. Then I don't always see a place in our world for advertising. I think if it annoys the shit out of you, and that's why ad blockers have really shaken up the industry. People wanting to block ads, it's just not good enough. Whereas I actually think we've found a way where people actually they go, right, I'm inviting that content creator into my life. I know that 1 in every 15 posts they get paid for, but they've put a lot more effort into that post than they have in the others. And often what we find is that these content creators get more engagement on their posts that they're being paid for. And they always write #spawn for sponsored. So that to me is marketing. It's authentic. There's no reason it shouldn't be more authentic than anything we've ever seen in history.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, imagine that you know, someone that's taken years to build this audience is not going to just fuck it up by picking any brand they like.
Well, that's why it's perfectly moderated, because if they overstep the mark, they just lose the very thing they're trying to monetize. This will be you.
As a founder, bringing in a CEO can be tough. Which was your preferred earn-in or buy-in?
Okay, so is that? Can you give me context around the earn-in or buy-in? Is that?
I have no idea.
Is that earning the right, or is that actually paying?
It's earning equity.
Earning equity.
There is obviously equity in my deal. I think as any early stage CEO would make sure of. But I've also bought in through various rounds, and the first raise I was involved in, I felt pretty strongly about the business, and it actually helped my ability to pitch investors to say, I'm chipping in this much money.
Do you want a water beer?
No, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Chipping in this much money of my own, because I felt fully confident in the business, knowing that the people who were behind it and what I thought it was capable of. But yeah, it's a much easier conversation with a potential investor when you're putting your own skin in the game.
Nice.
I might just add to that. Keep in mind, in those days, like I had 2 advisors that had been involved in their own startups. At this stage, I didn't know what a startup was. I had no idea. Like I'm talking like less than 2 years ago. They led me through it. I had the concept, and they guided me through all this. And I still don't really know a lot about it. Like you guys would know more about the space, which is why Ant was so critical. Because in those days, I was saying, I can build this thing, but I can't run a business. And I was really upfront about my weaknesses. And that's why they backed me, because I was like, I can't do that. I have no idea about that. I don't even want to be part of that. And for the first 8 months, I had to do all that. Do the shareholders agreements, go out there, recruitment, writing, CEO. You know, it was just horrendous. I hated it. I was a fish out of water, and I had to wear every hat in the whole business. And even though they were advising me, they were saying, you got to do this. And I hated it. It was like trying to learn Japanese under pressure, while people were ringing me every few days going, how'd you go? And I'd go out there and pitch. And I was horrendous. You know, like Ant's gone back to pitch some of the people that I pitched, and they said he was shit out. And I was. But I've always been upfront. It's funny, even though I say fake it till you make it, you know, the things that I back, but you should always understand your weaknesses. And if you're weak in an area, don't try and just trudge through it. It'll take you forever and you may never get off the ground. Earn some money doing what you do best, and then hire them, or, you know, you just got to work on your strength. Everyone says work on your strengths and work on your weaknesses. No, don't work too hard on your weaknesses. I mean, you've got to improve on your strengths. And get them, but don't spend time on stuff that you're not born to do. And you just know who you are, and that's hard, because once you identify that, then you go, right, I've got to find another way to have the business brain. And then, you know, you find a way. We raised some money, had that ability. So yeah, it's important to understand that even in our business, there's so much we don't know. And I actually reckon that's how we hire as well. one thing that we do in our business is important. The whole lens, the whole filter of what we're doing is this whole process is educational. Because as soon as, that's what it's about. Like that is the reward that we are learning. Because as soon as you actually are clear on why you're doing it, you can't fail. Like you think about it, when something goes completely wrong and an investor pulls out at the 11th hour, you know what we're saying on the phone? That's shit house. But hey, at least we have the opportunity over the next 10 days to know what it's like when an investor pulls out and we've got to go up against the ropes and we've got to do this. Do you see what I mean? Like everything is a benefit. You know, if someone's having whenever negative stuff goes on, we go, this is great. You know, we wouldn't have that opportunity to have this discussion, would we? Now we know what it's like, and it's just an amazing filter that allows you to feel like you get value out of when the ups and the downs, as opposed to shit. You know how. That's how we measure it. If you're measuring it by money and all these other things, that's not to say that we're not trying to make as much money for our investors as we possibly can. And if the money, but it makes the experience and the journey enriching because it's bloody tough. And if you're not able to get anything out of the bad moments, then it's just pretty dry. Like it just feels like you're just pouring, because you're not getting money out of it. You know, like you're getting credibility, you're getting the experience, you're getting the opportunity of being able to try new things with support. And we appreciate that. Like we have a great sense of gratitude because we feel blessed that people have given us money. We're spending their money on our development.
So let's, we didn't quite get to this bit, so I want to kind of end on it, but you've recently just raised a round. You're thinking about going global. What's the next big moves?
So about September last year, we closed a Series A, which was 5.4 million in capital, with the help of a VC out of Sydney called Expo Partners, who've been great. That capital was designed to take us into new markets. So we've obviously got a position in the Australian market, and we're not taking our foot off the Australian market at all. So we've opened up a Sydney office now, but certainly we understand we're in a very fast-moving industry. Fast-moving industry requires capital, and so we were quite aggressive with the raising that we did, so that we could expand to where we felt that money was best placed. And after months of analysis and getting together as a sort of subcommittee on expansion, we decided that the UK was a place for us. So we're now in the process of planning that. We've hired our first UK employee, UK country manager, who started in January, and we're now going through the process of what does launch look like, how does a product need to be modified, how do we build a team over there, and how do we replicate what we've done here? And it sounds quite simple, but there's a whole host of analysis that went into all those decisions of, you know, what does the competitive landscape look like, what does the industry maturity look like over there, and how well suited is our product to that market. I think one of the key things that I could impart on everyone is, if you're going international, like, why make it harder for yourself by trying a new language and a new culture when you've got somewhere like the UK or US, if that's where you decide, where it's same language, same culture, and we tossed that around for a lot of days because Asia presented huge opportunities, but very comfortable with that decision for the UK. And
so you kind of ended there on a message for the entrepreneur. Jules, could you want to end on something like just a piece of advice for the entrepreneur that's going through the day-to-day, mate?
No.
I want everyone back on their feet. Big thanks to Jules and the gang. Thanks, guys. Come on.